Hi, so today we're going to have a wee look at my recent acquisition, which was a Scots Almanack. Almanacks tend not to be very expensive, tend to be acquired fairly easily, to be honest, even the particularly old ones. They aren't full of historical stories, so I think that vendors oftentimes will sell them fairly cheaply just so that they're sold at all. And because you would need to be looking for very specific information to go to these kind of books. Now, they're not big, very small wee books. This is my most recent acquisition, the one we'll be looking at today. This one I obtained a number of years ago. I've already uploaded the main calendars from this one, and that was to go along with the Book a Days articles, just to be added to the month overviews. These are kind of how the calendars would come out, and I love just how much detail is on these, because if you opened up your diary to that, you'd take a wee minute to understand what it was you were seeing, wouldn't you? But it has all of the days that are celebrated or to be remembered, especially religious days, saints' days, etc., masses. So this one I did go through and take some scans of already. This one is 1794, I believe. Let me have a wee look. 1794. Now, this is not in good nick. This really would have only cost me like a few pounds, and really not very much at all. But I wasn't looking for it because it was, again, very pretty or had lots of interesting stories or what have you. But this vendor, or someone who's had it previously, has removed a seal here, possibly to sell it separately. And the reason that I'm assuming that is because if we go back to our first page here, you'll notice that there's a coat of arms missing, the Edinburgh coat of arms, because this is an Edinburgh Almanack. It's not been cut out very well, but what they'll do is they'll disassemble the books and take out all the more interesting items on first sight. So if there's any illustrations, if there's any coat of arms, if there's any seals or interesting stamps, then those will be cut out and sold separately, because they can make money in that way better than selling the book as a whole. And we don't like those people. Those people are awful. I'm a firm believer that the original publication should be maintained as they're found. Of course, you're going to have your human additions to publications, and I kind of love that. I love when I purchase a book that you're just seeing maybe the cover, the title page, maybe the publisher's page and what have you, and then when you get it, there's like wee notes written in the margins, or there's like quite often newspaper articles that have been cut out of papers to back up or go along with stories from within the publication. You can see that someone has made very good use of this book. I'm sure all of this would mean something to someone. So whether they're updating the prices of things, locations of things, they're keeping their almanac up to date for themselves and for their own purposes, perhaps. But this is why this book it's not going to be typed up and put on the site. at all. I took the calendars from it again for the Book of Days, and it does have some excellent information. It tells you everything about Edinburgh, being an Edinburgh Almanack. It tells you how much you can expect to pay for a hackney from one part of the city to another part, or even if you're going out of the city, how much you can expect to other places further afield, what you can expect to pay, etc. It tells you all the main streets. It's got listings of businesses on these streets, etc. So it might not be immediately interesting, but if you were researching something very specific, and I feel like maybe even historical fiction would benefit of books like these, because it gives you the minutiae of that specific era, you know. So this is the new acquisition, and this one is, I think, 4 years later than this. I think this is 1798. So late 18th century. This has a seal. It doesn't have items cut from it that we can see. You can see it's the same type of marbling, so we can expect that this would likely have had a cover similar to this. Unfortunately, there's a chunk taken out of the leather here. You can see where it's been tooled to make it a bit more interesting. Not a lot of decoration on it, because again, it was a book that was meant to be a pocket book. It was meant to be a book that was of use to people travelling to the city for the first time or travelling around Scotland. Here, this one's the Scots Almanack, so it doesn't have a coat of arms, whereas the Edinburgh one had the Edinburgh coat of arms previously. Say being the second after bisextile or leap year, with a complete lists and correct calendar. Here you've got the same type of calendars, along with all the different days that you would bear in mind to take heed of through the year. Rising and setting of the sun, the different times throughout the year. This is Peers of Scotland, so this probably takes up quite a lot of the book. So we've got Blood Royal, we've got the Dukes, Marquises, Earls, lots of Earls, many Earls, Viscounts, Barons. So this would have really given you a list of the people to cozy up to at parties and make the acquaintance of if you wanted to get anywhere in society. These were the people that you would want to know. The class system was very refined, with a lot of steps, a lot of stages to getting places. And back in this era, this again is the late 18th century. So when you think of industrialization, really from the Victorian era, you had innovation occurring on a fairly rapid scale from about the first half of the 19th century. The people that would have made use of this book, that would have published this book and known its details, would have lived a life that had been very much unchanged for centuries. They would have grown up much as their grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents had. There was very little by way of technological innovation. Farming tools changed somewhat. Obviously, the tools of war, weaponry, They changed over the centuries. Warfare tactics changed, but when it came down to the way of actually living life, these people, well, they lived very much the same lives as their forebears had for centuries before them. Come to 50 years after this book is published, and everything changes and keeps changing. We can't really get into the minds of these people who hadn't known much by way of change for centuries, because we're always at the start of some new era. There's always some new invention, some new way of doing a thing, or some change to the human experience of the world on every other week these days. So we almost find it hard to keep up with how quick things change. Back when I was a wee lassie, you didn't have the internet, I do find it hard sometimes to think how I passed my days before computers and smartphones and things really took over. But you have all this minutiae of detail that people writing historical fiction could make very good use of. It's not going to lend itself to story, but the places, the costs, the people that were in authority for any given situation. And you've got the courts of session, you've got your nobility, you've got just, these are so far have just been lists of people in varying positions, university rectors, clergy of Scotland. Is this going to take us through the varying presbyteries and synods? So that'll take up a good portion of the book, going through all of that. And it meant that no matter where you found yourself in Scotland, you knew who the authoritative figures were. Were you a traveller? And there may be some people out there screaming at the screen that I'm foregoing the use of gloves while thumbing through this book that's almost 250 years old. Wearing gloves when dealing with publications especially, it's not really to be advised. You lose the sensation from your fingers. You don't feel the pages nearly so well. And I've been there. I've been in the position where I've thought, no, gloves are the way forward. Back at the start, gloves are the way forward. You can't be like fingering these old books. It'll make them fall apart or dissolve or some. It's not the case. As long as your hands are clean and dry, you're not going to do them damage. But wearing gloves and trying to turn a page that you can't feel properly, I've been there when the page is folded the wrong way, just at the edge, and you just think, that's, and you're just adding to how aged the thing is. When you make mistakes with them, if you're not turning the pages properly, if you're not looking after them, holding them with your hands is fine. You can feel them, you can feel the page edges, and you can get away with going through them without hurting them too much. So if there are folk out there that would be interested in seeing something like this for themselves and going through it, there are cheap available options online going up for sale all the time. And I would recommend that you go for it. Don't be afraid that just by obtaining it, and by dint of your not living in a library or a museum, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to hurt the publications at all. I'm more concerned with the books I obtain while they're making their way to me in the mail than I am once they get here. I'm in full belief that all of these historical items should be kept in use, and they should be kept present in our memories. As long as there are a few people out there continuing to obtain these things, making use of them in whatever research they happen to be doing, whether it's for leisure or academic purposes, I can recommend getting the originals of these things. I actually started obtaining items with the London Illustrated. It was a supplementary magazine that had come along with an London Illustrated News edition, and it was regarding the British expedition into Benin when they destroyed and pilfered and murdered the people of Benin as an act of vengeance. And I'd been studying it for a University Arts and Humanities degree course I was doing, and I not once did I write an essay based purely on the information that the university provided. I always wanted to find out everything about the subject and read the context of the snippets of information we were being given. And when I went looking for this particular example from the Illustrated London News, I was surprised not only to find that it was available for purchase, but that it was available for about £6. And just having that in my hands for the first time was a proper experience. It was, oh my God, I'm holding something that's almost 200 years old. Well, it was like about 150 years old at that point, in my hands, and I'm being able to flip through it and read the entire thing, and I've got the pictures to go along with all the illustrations that accompanied this kind of supplement. So that's the research I remember most from university was the Benin research, and it was purely just because these items, these historical pieces of information, these publications are just so easy to obtain. I think people think they're more expensive than they are. I think people think they're more fragile than they are. And I think people are scared that they'll not be able to maintain the publication or the item amongst whatever collection they have without it coming to some harm. I mean, I've always had cats, but we got the 2 boys in a year ago, and you have to kitten proof. You have to certainly make sure that your collection can't be affected negatively by the fur babies you have in your home. But also children. Children are destructive. I'm fortunate not to have to entertain children in the house. I prefer it that way. The cats are enough to try and keep tabs on. But if you have a space and you have the inclination and the interest, then I'd say go for it. Find out what's out there, find out what is available, because you'll come very quickly to realise what you can expect to pay for whatever it is you're looking for. So it's very difficult for people to rip you off when it comes to historical publications. I mean, the only example I'd seen of something like that was in Sir Walter Scott's Marmion. It was a tiny little edition. Let me see if I can find it here. So it's this book. It's the Scott Country, Sir Walter Scott's Scott Country. What you'll notice here is that there's no publication year, and I was gifted this copy, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's just gorgeous. and I had found somebody selling the same book online, and this was after I had read it. Now, this copy has footnotes and extra information that give away that it's no earlier than 1950 this came out, but the person trying to sell this online was making out that it was 1800 and something that it had been published, and but they'd also included how many pages there were. So I messaged them and I said, listen, you and I both know that that book isn't 19th century. Like, I'm just giving you a heads up that I've noticed that you're trying to sell this for more money than it's worth, that you're missing out the fact that it has details that a 19th century book couldn't have had, because it speaks of things that were in the future, things that very much happened within the 20th century. They didn't get back to me. Neither did they change the price of their book, but I just wanted them to know that I had noticed and that you can't be doing that, you know. That's the only real way that I've seen that people try and con people out of money for historical publications, is when there isn't a publisher's date. In that case, you want to be very careful and research what it is. Read all of the description of the publication, because there are sometimes hints there alone, or in some of the screenshots, there's wee hints of things that allude to its date. So anyway, I've gone off on something of a tangent, which is apparently my way when I have a camera and a mic set up. So I hope you enjoyed having a wee look at the almanac. It is a fascinating thing, and I can't wait to get into it. There's less writing throughout this one. I'm not sure what this says. It would take me a minute to work it out. I don't know, a mere something, the first day of June 1805. There we've got again a mere, maybe a name, a mere. Covered the 3rd day of July. Don't know. There's names here that might be brought up were they to be scanned in and the filters played about with. It's not nearly as written on as my other older one. Hugh Cumming in Hall. Received from Hugh Cumming in Hall. 1818. So you've got someone's inscription from 1818, you've got someone's inscription from 1805, and we know that the book itself was for 1798. So it's been through a number of hands, and it's obviously been kept quite a lot better than this other Edinburgh one. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I may see you the next time for some more. Take care.